I have a concern. I forgot to turn this microphone on. I have a joy. I told you last week that Katie was going up to New York to sing with the university choir at Carnegie Hall, and they did it, and she survived. She went to see Hadestown on Broadway, and it was wonderful, I think. She loved that. And they got on the bus at 5:30 this morning, and they'll be home, she said, 7 to 9 at night. I think they're probably exceeding the speed limit a little bit, but we'll see. And I don't know when they're going to eat in that whole time. So.
And I light one final candle for all of those joys and concerns that are still tender on our heart. We will hold them close. Our song this morning is in the gray hymnal, 147, When All the Peoples on This Earth. So 147, if you will join me. Thank you. It's always hard when it's a new song. I appreciate that. We do have a story for all ages.
Well, we can invite our one youth to come sit. We had to take up the rugs for the tables, but he doesn't have to. You can take a seat. You can see the pictures from up there. This is a story. This is a story by Grace Byers, and the pictures by Katura Bobo, and it's called I Believe I Can. It's very crisp, so it's hard to turn the pages. Oops. I can sail like mighty ships, like the oceans, I run deep. I can stretch just like the Alps until I reach my highest peak. I can charge just like a train, like a rocket, I'll ignite. Like a star, I can project my brightest shine against the night. Being spacemen. Space women. I am like the lion's roar. I am like the dragon's flames. I'm worthy because I'm me, and there is value to my name. I can show you guys over here. I can build just like a brick. I keep going like a clock. I can hold just like cement. I can last just like a rock. Grounded firm, I'm like the soil, like the sky. I'm bound with two. When I believe in myself, there's simply nothing I can't do. I probably can't go down a slide anymore, but that's what they're doing here. Like the hero, I am brave. I face my fears despite my fright, because I know I'm not alone, and in the end, I'll be all right. Sometimes I am right, and sometimes I am wrong, but even when I make mistakes, I learn from them to make me strong. Wrote on the wall, and now they got to clean it up. I may not win at all I do. I may experience defeat. I know baking defeats some of us. But I'll dust off and try again to be the best that I can be. Scoring goals, we're getting better. Here we go. I like the power. I know my power lies within. There's nothing that can hold me down. I'm busy here. There's light within my smile. There's a voice within my sound. If you can see, but on the right-hand side, the boy is doing sign language. My presence matters in this world. My life is worthy. There's a plan. I know I can do anything. If only I believe I can.
Thank you, Deb. Out of gratitude for all we have been given and all we have now, we share our resources because we love and trust each other, and because this church enriches our lives and empowers us to make our world better. We rely on each other, members and friends, and we appreciate payment of pledges. Our morning offering will now be given. From the love of our hearts, by the work of our hands, our love is made real. This morning, our speaker is our very own Deb Crocker, a born UU, which we have had few here. And so she's going to talk about being in Boston in the early 70s. Deb?
So yeah, I was going to just tell you a short story about something that was going on in Boston in the 70s. It actually started in the 60s, but in the 70s. But I need to preface it, of course, by reminding you that I did grow up as a UU, right outside of Boston, in a suburb. And in my church, there were a couple of things that were really memorable to me. I remember them even now. And those two things were the parties that we had. Boy, did we have some parties. And as a teenager, we were always invited to these things. Pardon me? Sorry. So, yeah, as a teenager, we were always invited to the parties. But the other thing that was very memorable to me was the social justice that we engaged in. And the women, it was a lot of the women in the church, and the men too, obviously, but the women in the church were very engaged in social justice. And the things that they did have stuck with me over all these years. And so I was just going to tell you a little bit about one thing that went on with that. in our church. One thing again, this is just a short story. It's not going to take me very long to tell you this whole thing, but one thing I wanted to tell you was about later in life. My mother, who was at that church, she was very involved in social justice, and there was an older friend of hers. The friend was, 10 or 15 years older than she was, and the two of them would go into Boston to the UU Urban Ministry. My mother didn't drive, so she would have to catch a ride with this family friend. And I remember her telling me later on, when the family friend was about 90, my mother described to me that the car ride was awfully scary. But she went anyway. So that was the first lesson. In a homily, there are lessons. She went anyway. But the other part I wanted to tell you about was Boston in the late 60s and 70s, segregation and busing. And Boston was one of the most segregated cities, especially in the schools, up into the 70s. And you remember when Brown versus the Board of Education was passed? It was 1954. And in the early 60s, I had to pick out some dates. It was in 1964. The parents went to the school committee, 1964. They went to the school committee because the black schools were segregated and they were decaying. And they told the school committee that something needed to be done about this. It was not separate but equal. There was nothing equal about it. Well, the school committee refused to do anything about it. So time goes on, and a little bit later, some of the parents then decided what they were going to do, and to kind of ease the way into desegregation, to help people understand that it wasn't the end of the world. They got together and they created something. I always knew it as METCO. I had to look up what it stood for. It was the Metropolitan Council for Educational Opportunity. And what they did was they arranged a busing system, and the onus was on the kids in the city, the black kids in the city. They would get on the bus about 6:30 in the morning, and they would bus out to the suburbs, the white suburbs, to the schools, so that the people living in these schools would, well, there were two parts, I think. Obviously, the kids that could take this bus out to these schools could get a better education. At least their schools were not falling down. But the other part is that these communities would see that having black students within their midst was nothing different from what they experienced every day. And that really was a bigger part of it because, and I looked up, in the 50 years, over 50 years that METCO was running, they serviced about 3,300 students. So, right, that was a drop in the bucket. 50 years worth of school students. Only 3,300 could participate in METCO. They had to have, there were grants, right? Somebody had to pay for this. And so there was action by the state legislature that allowed this to happen. There were grants that were applied for. The towns had to participate, and they could apply for grants. And my own town had METCO students. I remember a couple of them. But by the time I got to high school, we actually had, around the other side of my block, there was a black family that moved there. He was a district court in Roxbury, and they could afford to come out and live in our suburbs. So we had some minor integration in the 70s with METCO students, and I don't know if it was the only black family in my town, but it very likely was that living there. So anyway, so that's the setup. Right? This is Boston. Starting in the 60s, they're petitioning, they're trying to do something about it, and it's even going into the 70s. And so finally, what they did was they petitioned the court to fix this. And the remedy that was centered on was busing within the city. The students would be bused to integrate the schools, and if if there were white students going to these black schools and black students going to these white schools, it would de facto perhaps even out funding for the schools and make things more equal. Well, that did not go over well. There were riots. And I know, I know some people now who are just convinced that black people riot, white people riot. I mean, these were riots about desegregation in the schools. They said it was about preserving neighborhood schools, right? Oh, preserve our neighborhood schools, but it wasn't. And when you saw the things that were written on the wall, you knew that wasn't what their concern was, right? Their concern was integrating the schools. So there was a lot of activity around that. And I think it was in now the final story I'm going to relate to you, I can't remember if it was 74 or 75. I know it was in the midst of this. And in 1974, Judge Garrity was the one that was overseeing the court case. He ordered the busing integration of the schools, and that's what set things off. They were under receivership with the courts until 1988. Anyway, so what I'm remembering may have been in 74 or 75, but the year perhaps is not terribly important. But what I remember was members of our church, there was a big rally on Boston Common for desegregation, and the members of our church, we went in, we all went in there, maybe not all, but we went in there and participated in that rally. And the reason, I remember it because it was hot. It was really, really hot, so I know it was in the summertime. Now, Boston, I was a New Englander at that time, really, really hot may have meant 78, 80, I don't know, But it was really, really hot. And we were just sweating. And I remember, sitting on the blankets. I remember the minister there, and I remember the jokes about by the sweat of our brows. And it may not have been a really big thing, it didn't affect the judge, it didn't, I don't know who it affected, but it was important. It was really important that we did this. It was really important that other people did this. This was a big rally on Boston Common about finally desegregating the city schools. And that kind of was the story I wanted to tell you about. It was a little thing. It was a big thing in Boston. It was tremendous upheaval. It was a mess. In the summer of 75, I know that year for sure, it was the summer of 75, I participated in a Unitarian Universalist Service Committee project. And my role, it was a month, I lived in the city for a month, but my role was to go to South Boston. There was a black student in our group, and he was not allowed to participate in the South Boston cohort because it wasn't going to work out well then. It was 75. But so we went into South Boston, and our job was to go around and ask people if they had jobs for teens, to work up that. And we did a movie about something. But in walking around South Boston, I saw the graffiti on the walls. So that's how, my sense. South Boston was not someplace I necessarily went. It wouldn't have been dangerous for me. South Boston at the time was Irish Catholic, very white. So it wouldn't have been dangerous for me, but it wasn't someplace I was necessarily going to go. But I did with the service committee, and I saw all of that. So, like I said, the upshot of my little story, that's my story, is that it's important. You may not think that you are going to change the world with your one act. And it occurred to me, even if the day is hotter than heck, and even if the car ride to get there is really scary, be there. Just be there. And I ended this up this way because of what Shampa said. There is today at Snow Hinton Park at 3 o'clock a gun sense rally. And I have something for everybody here. I brought some poster board and some markers. And, I didn't tell you the biggest part of my story. And I forgot. And the rally on Boston Common. the slogan that we had. The slogan was 21 years too long to wait. 21 years too long to wait, the time is now to segregate. 21 years too long to wait, the time is now to segregate. You want to say something?
I would agree. I just happened to be reading a book last night on the history of race in America. This is no small story. Governments tried to do busing, and there were riots all over the country.
Yeah.
Charlotte, North Carolina, Atlanta. And they said a group of citizens figured out how to do it in Boston, and it worked, and everybody and other people started to do that too. So this is really a big story.
Yeah, so they may have been talking about Metco. I don't. Yeah. I mean, I never saw Metco as a big desegregation move. It was, again, designed to make people comfortable, to understand. You know, that was the original, the origins of that program. Is if we're going to, the thinking was if we're going to desegregate, people have to be comfortable. They have to know, that this is not the big scary thing that they thought. So anyway, so yes, 21 years too long to wait. The time is now to segregate. Desegregate. Desegregate. And that would have been in 1975. So I guess that actually tells me when our rally was, because we were chanting that, and 21 years after 1954 was 1975.
It seems surprising. I mean, Boston was built on ethnic roots. The
Yeah.
Irish, the Italian, I mean, that's such a strong heritage.
Yeah, I mean, Boston was very, now Boston, still have friends who live there. Now Boston is very integrated, ethnically diverse in many neighborhoods, but, it may have been ethnically diverse in its neighborhoods, but the Irish lived in South Boston. The Italians lived in the North End. There's Beacon Hill, which was a very wealthy area, and wealthy and white. And so it may have had a lot of diversity, but it was very segregated in the way it built itself up. So anyway, to finish my story, I brought poster board and markers. And like I said, 21 years too long to wait. The time is now. To segregate is probably not what we want to write on those. It's not. But I did, I had a couple of ideas for slogans, and what I want you to do is think as you eat your lunch of some ideas, and you can take a piece of poster board and make a poster for this rally. If you can't be there, and I know some people can't, I mean, I'm going to take a chair because my knee hurts, and I'm going to take an umbrella because it's going to be hot. But I'm going to be there. And so, I mean, two things that I thought of for signs is one that says gun sense, not nonsense. And the other one, which is going around Twitter, it starts with a pound sign, and it just says stand with Uvalde. So if you have some other ideas, catchy slogans, let's put them on those posters. If you can't go, I'll take them for you and give them to somebody else to hold. But let's make our presence known. I'm going to wear my Side with Love T-shirt because we are known as Unitarian Universalists in this town. When you wear that orange T-shirt, they know who you are. They know where you're from. We've actually picked up that reputation. But with that, again, that's the end of my short story. So with that, let's extinguish the chalice. And if you've got a program, I mean, you can read along with me. And this is what it says. As we extinguish this flame, let us remember this truth. We can hear it in the water, in wood, and in stone. We are earth of the earth, and we are bone of its bone. Take the light with you and share it across the world.
Thank you, Deb. Our closing words are from Melinda Gates. We all want something to offer. This is how we belong. It's how we feel included. So if we want to include everyone, we have to help everyone develop their talents and use their gifts for the good of the community. That's what inclusion means. Everyone is a contribute. Now our closing.